time to start your engines and be part of the conversation. You can always ask the experts, Raffi and Dan Rosenberg, because it's now time for Clutch Radio. The show starts now.
Welcome. We're back in studio. We're not out in the middle of a field with choppy video. But we will discuss that a little bit today.
Yes, we will.
It is Saturday, October 23rd. It's 10 a.m. on the West Coast. I'm Dan.
And I'm Raffi.
There's Raffi over there. I got the point right.
And that's Dan.
There we go.
We finally got it right.
So today's show, we have a lot to talk about and a little time to get to it. But we will talk about our experience last week of going out in the middle of the field in Paulsboro, Washington. We might revisit it because apparently there's another thing going on there with selling some tools and some other things. But the thing I'd like to talk about today is car values.
Value.
Everybody's like, what's my car worth? And they always say, well, Blue Book says.
Blue Book.
I'm wondering how many. There are so many different pricing guides and some people have never heard of. There's one called Galves. Have you ever heard of Galves?
I have not.
See, and this is Raffi, and he's never heard of Galves.
Galves.
Yes. There's Black Book, as well as Blue Book. There's NADA, which is no longer called NADA.
Yeah.
It's now called JD Power.
Yes.
It was NADA was the National Automotive Dealers Association.
Yes.
And so a lot of the banks would use the NADA book, not the Blue Book.
Right.
There's Edmunds,
yes,
which is now owned by CarMax. So, can it be as accurate as it used to be?
There's also the Hagerty Value Guide.
Yes, but Hagerty is typically the older cars.
Yes,
you're not going to find a new car usually.
There's also what's the one that the DMV or licensing departments use for older vehicles now? Is it the Old Car Value Guide? I think that's the one.
Is it the Old Car Value Guide? That used to be part of NADA, if I'm not mistaken, wasn't it? Wasn't it the NADA Old Car Value Guide?
Kelly Blue Book, which is what it was called, Kelly being the company, I think it's still under kbb.com. Kelly Blue Book used to have the Old Car Guide for when cars were older. I think it was more than 10 years old, to help dealers, as what they found in the 60s and into the 70s was that many people, as new car prices got quite a bit higher, older cars were becoming value propositions for people that wanted to keep their cars going. And this was not normally a scenario, but during the 50s, this notion of self-mechanic or home mechanic, the fact that you could have your own garage in your residential, your home, you could actually work on your car. And there was a lot more self-help, self-work, home mechanic type of thing. So people were able to keep older cars running longer. And that started the late 50s into the 60s, started the sort of classic car collecting revolution.
Yes. Now, the thing is, this is very interesting. So Kelly Blue Book was started by a guy who owned Kelly Ford in Los Angeles, where the Staples Center now is. That was Kelly Ford. And I had somebody on one of my old shows in LA from Kelly Blue Book, and I got the whole backstory, and I'm just going from memory at this point. But he had a list of all the cars he sold that week, and he put it on blue paper, and it became the Kelly Blue Book, because he sold, hundreds, he was a huge dealer, and people wanted to know, well, what's he selling the cars for? And that was how people were valuing cars. And it grew into this huge company, still based in Irvine, but now it's owned by Cox Automotive, who also owns Auto Trader.
Well, and the Kelly Blue Book were, I believe they were monthly published little blue books, and they were just about the size to fit inside a salesman's sport coat pocket.
Yeah.
So they could, if someone came in and said, I've got a 58 Buick I want to trade in, they just reach in, thumb through 58 Buick, look for the price of, recently sold 58 Buicks for that month and see where they were trending. And that's what they would use as their guide for offers on trade.
Yeah. And this was the, let me see if I can pull up the picture here. I still have one or two old ones.
There they are.
So they would only go back to certain points. Now this blue book that you're seeing here is the one that was the retail one that you could go to Barnes and Noble and buy.
Yes.
And it would usually be a 6-month book, and it would just be retail, trade-in value, private party value. The actual one that the dealers had, I believe, were monthly, and sometimes they did bi-monthly, so it was every 2 months.
Yes.
Or twice a month, but it depended. But then they also had the used car one, the old car one, which is a little thicker because it went way back. What's interesting here is Kelley Blue Book, if you really look at their site now, they only go back to 1992, yet they go up to 2024 already, which is weird. That must mean there's a 2024 car that's already out there somewhere.
Now,
doesn't make sense.
Not that long ago, you also had this book, which if you can see a little clearly here, that's Durant Auto Sales, I believe.
Durant Motor Cars. Look at that.
Yeah. So Durant Motor Cars would publish this, and it would have pretty much every car that was available with features. And so you could say, what's the 59 Dodge? And it had explanation of the actual, the Custom Royal and the Royal series here. And then it would also talk about outstanding sales features. So you could list some of those features here. And so as a salesperson, if you were not familiar with that car and you had one on your lot, this was a great way to study. And, it had all sorts of brands, Mercury.
I think you're giving away your secret, Raffi.
Uh-oh.
This is how you know everything about cars. You have all these books. You read.
So, I actually read. And there's for the Corvette. And so they would publish these, and salespeople could use them to study up on the cars and, be a little bit more aware of what each car was as a feature. And salespeople kept these on hand. And the joke was that if you go into the dealer's bathroom, this was the main reading material that was there. So that's where the salesman was.
It's called Crap and Study.
Yes.
And that's the thing is when you get if you're on a used car lot, new cars, you get factory training and there's training manuals and you get certified and you have all the things you have to learn about each car. But with used cars, you're at a Chevy dealership and a Honda comes in, you don't know anything about it.
That's right.
Now they use the internet, and honestly, most of the time, the customer is more educated than the salesperson because they've done research on the car that they're looking to buy, and unless it's at a new car store and it's a new car, the customer is probably going to know a little bit more. Now, the Kelley Blue Book issue is they're kind of now more of they're trying to be a one source. Like, oh, you want to buy a car? You sell your car? We give you an instant cash offer. They've got everything. It's like a central location. But then if you go to what used to be NADAguides.com, when you go to that, it now shows you that it is JD Power, which is the rating company that does like JD Power Awards.
Sure.
It's kind of weird that they changed it. It still says native values, but it's JD Power.
Well, and one of the things that's driving all of this interest in the automotive commodity is that many of these companies have realized that in addition to, of course, the importance of gathering data and being able to promote your company as a data-rich environment, there's tremendous advertising value in having this data. But independent of that, it's the automotive buying sort of psychology. If you think about, it's really, other than the home that you purchase or the education you'll buy your children, it's pretty much the largest expense a family will have. And it's not only a single expense, it's an expense that'll occur several times over the life of the family. So if you look at the average American family, they'll buy a standard sedan and they'll pay $30,000, well, they're going to do that anywhere from 3 to 5 times a year, or I'm sorry, not 3 to 5 times a year, 3 to 5 times in their family lifespan. If they have kids, they'll also buy cars for the kids, or they'll help them purchase those cars. And this doesn't include the information that they'll need to gather on the shopping or buying of those cars, or the references and help that they'll be giving other family members from their experience with those cars. So a $30,000 car 3 to 5 times, you can see how that number adds up to a significant amount of dollar value from a purchase perspective, far ahead of the Amazons and Walmarts and other companies that are doing 10 to 100 times the amount of marketing and promotion and web-based broadcasting for their services.
Yeah. And now going to the NADA, like I pulled up an old car. I put the 92 truck that we had, which sold. So that one's gone. But it shows, and this one didn't even have the 4-wheel drive or let me put any options in, but it shows the original MSRP of the 2500, just the standard car, not diesel, not 4x4, was $14,000 back in 92. And low is 1,950 and high retail 6,950. That's not diesel. That's not 4x4. So the guy that bought it got a really good deal. But so you got the NADA guide, you've got KBB, and what's crazy is banks on the West Coast use KBB, banks on the East Coast use NADA.
Yeah.
So it's a different valuation. And then Black Book, which
one's Lowry's, one's McCormick.
Exactly. Well, it's almost like Best Foods and Hellman's.
Yes.
Except those are actually the same exact.
Well, the data is not going to be different. That's the thing. What's important to understand when it comes to car values is that the actual data is not going to be different. The sales are going to be the same. What's going to be different is how that data is averaged, how it's processed, and how fresh and current that data is. So one of the things that's super important is to get real-time information on actual sales, and that's difficult to do because you've got a lot of factors in car sales: the actual selling price, the tax, the license, additional costs, sometimes delivery costs folded in there. So there are a lot of factors that will change the value of a vehicle, particularly a vehicle sold in the secondary market. So the data itself, while consistent and known, can be manipulated differently depending on how those averages are calculated.
Right. And some of them look at 30-day average, some look at 90-day average, some look at auction prices, some don't have the data for the auction prices. So there's so many different factors. I think the bottom line is the car is worth, this is what I've always told people, the least someone will sell it for and the most someone will pay for it.
That's a good
That's really it. You know, if I have a car and the least I'm going to go is $5,000 and the most you're going to go is $4,000, well, my car is not worth $5,000 and it's also not worth $4,000 because I didn't sell it to you for $4,000 and you didn't buy it for $5,000. Now, if we meet in the middle at $45,000, that's the true price. Now, we've got some good questions in the comments already. Adam says, if there wasn't a guide to set value on a used car, how would dealers figure that out? They wouldn't. They'd have to go by their own experience of, well, let's see, if I take in this car, I sold one. Geez, I've never sold one like this before. I mean, if they can't even look at other dealers' inventory, if there was no internet and there was no guide, you'd have to like pick up the phone, assuming there's a phone. Let's say this probably did it in the 30s and 40s. They pick up a phone. They'd call a dealer that has cars like that. Hey, I've got a 38 Plymouth here. Look at here, see? That's how they all talk back then. Yeah. So I got a 38 Plymouth here, see? And it's got 142 miles on it. This guy must drive a lot.
So to answer your question, in the 30s, for example, cars were manufactured and sold new. And during the Depression, there was a tremendous loss, and almost everything of value had to be reevaluated. And so it was crazy. You could buy a Duesenberg for $100, and that was basically the value of the metal. then during the war, old cars were considered value for their metal, because the country needed metal to be recycled and used to help with the war effort. But we don't really get into value of used vehicles until after the Second World War as a commodity in volume, because after a car was used up prior to the Second World War, it became scrap. So the value of the vehicle was the scrap value. And that was all a vehicle was worth. Even if it was running, it was basically still considered scrap value. So by the time you get into the 50s, where highways are across America and cars are driving much faster, and people want cars that drive faster, which made a lot of cars from the 30s obsolete. 50s cars during the 60s were still able to keep up. So that's when you started to see the volume of used cars increase. And to Adam's point, how did people figure it out? Literally, a dealership that sold new cars that got used cars, they would have the junior salesman get in the car and drive down to the corner of town and look at all the other cars they could find and find out what those other cars were selling for, come back, and that's how they would price it based on the average of what they saw in their community with competitors selling other cars. And then, as you said, they could pick up the phone, they could call somebody, but what they came to find, especially in the 60s, is that a 1954 Buick in one zip code was worth more than a 1954 Buick in another zip code. And that had a lot to do with what insurance companies were doing, is they were beginning to use the term redlining, where they would figure out how certain areas, certain vehicles, certain homes would be better cared for under certain circumstances. And they used those guidelines to drive prices higher for certain zip codes. And that still exists today, unfortunately. A car in a favored zip code, say Beverly Hills, or even some areas on the East Coast, certainly coastal states, coastal cities, they tend to get higher values for the vehicles because the assumption is they've been better cared for. And that's not always the case.
Yeah. And I think that the valuation too of cars, if you look at, 1955, a brand new car was what, $2,500?
A nice one. Yeah.
A really nice car.
Yeah.
So that car used, they couldn't sell it for $2,000.
Right.
They might sell it for $1,500, but there wasn't as much of a spread between the two. There's only so many numbers they could go with. Now you can buy a $150,000 Range Rover, fully loaded, brand new this year, and 5 years from now, it's $35,000.
Right.
So you've got, a huge chunk of money that's a difference. So the need for the guides is very important. But I think it goes back to the important thing is, just because a dealer says a car's worth what they say it's worth, doesn't mean that's what it's worth. The true final determiner of really what a car is worth is the bank, if you're financing, because the bank will only loan a certain percentage based on what they call loan to value. So if you have really good credit, you can actually go like 140% loan to value, meaning a $100,000 car, you could actually pay 140 for it, tax, license, everything, and they would still loan you the money because your credit's that good. Most banks like to see 80%. So they're never really upside down. So if you back out of your payments and you decide, I don't want to pay for it anymore, or you lose your job or something happens and you can't make your payments and they have to repossess the car, they're not upside down now. So they go to sell at the auction. They bought it for 80% of its value, and it's kind of staying with the value as the value depreciates. So those are two issues as well. A couple other things out of the comments. Of course, Chris says, good morning, boys. Keith says, oh my God, it's car talk. David, I haven't heard from David Justin is this the cooking show? I was supposed to do a cooking show with David. I'm sorry, David.
We can do a cooking show.
Yeah, David has this great idea where I think it was we would do he would do a recipe from his house and I would do it at my house at the same time. And we'd follow it, but there's no way I'm a horrible cook. And then he did say, great job, you guys. Thank you, David. Chris also says, I sold my dad's Z4 with only 70,000 miles a year and a half ago for $8,000, which seemed good, but now he probably could have got 12 to 15. Yeah, the car market has been very similar to the housing market.
Yeah,
It has changed a lot.
And there's a lot of speculation as to why this is happening and why used car prices have gone up dramatically. Only so much can be attributed to the chip shortage. I think a bigger aspect of what's going on is that I believe during the 18-month period of essential lockdown, one of the things people discovered was a safe and pleasant place to be was in your car. And the vehicle became something of a kind of not just a safety cocoon that you could be in, but it also became a way to get away from the home that you were stuck in. And so for many people, they came to realize that the car was something that was enjoyable and something that could serve as a kind of a personal mental health getaway scenario. The other thing that happened was that many people who had formerly used their car just simply for commuting, now all of a sudden they weren't commuting to work, so they rediscovered the pleasure of just plain driving for the sake of the enjoyment that driving can often give you. So I think a lot of people are buying second cars, particularly like Chris's father's Z4, because it's a fun car that you can park in your garage. And when it's sunny outside, you take the top down and you go for a drive and you have a great time. And even if it's cold outside, you turn the seat heaters on, you turn the heater on, and off you go. And for a lot of people, that's great therapy. And so it doesn't matter if you spend $8,000 or $12,000, the $4,000 difference, you figure you can recover when you resell the car. And if you don't, so what? It's been something you've enjoyed.
Now here's something interesting to show you. This is a little inside baseball. So there's a service that also owned by Cox Automotive, which is COX Automotive. They own Mannheim Auto Auction. They own Auto Trader. They own Kelley Blue Book. They own.
Do they also?
What's
do they
that?
also? Oh, go on.
No, you say. Do they also own what?
Do they also own Courtney Cox? That's what I was
wondering. Okay. No, they own David Arquette. But they also own TV and radio state. They're a huge conglomerate. And they own a product called V Auto, which a lot of dealers use, and it will give you all the values for different cars. So I just kind of zoomed in here. This is I forget what car this is, but look at the difference here.
Yeah.
Auction value 55, JD Power 4375, KBB $9,600, KBB.com, which will be retail 10.9. Now they're assuming wholesale and retail only has $1,000 spread, which is typically not true.
That's a big spread between, $4,000 to $10,000 is a big jump.
Yeah. So dealers it's a very specialized job at a dealership to really be able to buy cars properly. Yeah. And you make your money on the buy, as they always say. It's not how much you sell a car for, it's how much you bought it for. Because if you bought it right, you never lose money. But if you overpaid, you're probably going to lose money. Because if it's sat for too long on your lot, you're going to want to take it to the auction and you're just going to lose money. Now, Ray has a really good comment that's really long. But CarMax's mission statement suggests you bring us your vehicle, we'll give you our price, and then they'll shop it around. Give you a price, then shop it around. They desire to be the one stop for buying and selling. So they truly become the industry leader while Shift, Lots, and many others struggle for survival. CarMax may just knock KBB and others out because they're putting their money where their mouths are. And I'm here to tell you, they take huge losses at times. They lost over $3,000 on his Wrangler that he sold them.
So, and Ray brings up a good point, but for a company that does the volume that CarMax does, they can take losses. Just like your mutual fund will have multiple stocks in it, and some will do 140%, some will do minus 20%. So you can experience some of those losses when you have that volume or you have that scale working in your favor. The problem is if that scale gets tipped on an average basis and the aggregate totals no longer do the appropriate recoveries, you're not able to show profit. Now, I don't know enough about CarMax's profit and where they're getting their biggest profit, but I suspect their model includes much more than just buying and selling.
So the way their auction works, I'll pull up a quick little screen here too. Here's their run list for this week. So you can see some of the cars that they have, and they have about 200 cars running. So they give a little detail of each one. And as you go through, it'll show if there's issues, major engine defect, whatever. So now what happens is they have 200 cars. So they have like a spreadsheet base. So it's a system, I would say, not a spreadsheet, but they're watching as they make and lose money during the auction. So if they bought a car for, let's say, $3,000, and somebody at the auction, it's a dealer only auction, somebody at the auction buys it for $6,000, that's actually a bad thing for them, because that means they didn't pay their customer enough money. They don't want to steal cars from customers. They actually want to pay the most. They want to own, like Ray says, they want to own the market. So they're just watching as it goes up and down. If they break even at their auction, so they have 200 cars, and at the end of the day, they're at zero profit. They just made a ton of money on the fees that they're charging the dealers, the buy fee to buy that car. So they're making money there. Yes, they do make money on the car. I think years ago, I talked to somebody that worked there. Their goal was $1,500 a car is all they wanted to make. So 200 cars, if they walk away at the end of the day, whatever that math is, $300,000, they'd be happy if they did that. So on his Jeep, they lost $3,000, but they might have made $3,000 on the car right before it, or 10 cars before it. And they're like, yeah, we'll let this one go. We don't care, because, they sell. I've rarely seen one car as a turning it down. Like, they sell 100% of the cars almost every auction. It's very rare that they pass.
And it used to be when before, we'll just say before the digital automotive sales revolution, it used to be that if you had a car that was in very good shape and it was a low mile pre-owned car, you were best off selling it private party. And then after that, the next thing you would do if you didn't sell it private party is you would be best off going to your dealer that you had purchased the vehicle and negotiating a trade with that vehicle on a new one. That would be the next best thing. And then the worst possible is to take it to a dealer and just say, I'm done with this car. What will you give me for it in cash or in trade in on a used car?
Well, the cash and trade is really CarMax leveled the playing field, because they started the whole, we'll buy your car whether you buy one from us or not. They set it up.
Totally different now. Absolutely.
Yeah. And selling it outright to a dealer, it was usually the worst. Trading on a used car was probably just as good as trading on a new car. Probably better, because the markup on a used car is much higher than the markup on a new car. So they could actually make it look like they're giving you a lot more when you buy a used car. And that's why the cash price, and I always told people this, don't take your trade in. You just go in, negotiate your deal, and then throw in your trade.
Then throw in the trade, yeah.
Because the trade, you're going to get what it's really worth. Yeah. Because dealers will manipulate the numbers. They'll say, we'll give you $10,000 for your car, but they're really only giving you $7,000 because they could have marked their car down $3,000. They decided not to. So in their back end, they show that they only paid $7,000 for your car, and they take it out of the front end profit of the other car. So when they go to sell your car now, the cost basis is only $7,000, not $10,000.
Right.
And I learned this a very weird way my first week in the car business. On my birthday in 1993, a young 23-year-old kid, I was trying to sell a guy the new Firebirds came out. I was working at a Pontiac dealership. And so brand new 93 Firebirds are out. And the guy came in and he really wanted one, and we just couldn't get the deal done. And so my general manager takes over, and he ends up selling him a year-old Camaro that somebody had just traded in on a brand new Trans Am. And I'm all upset. I'm like, I'm going to lose money here. And because, I saw that, this Camaro, we paid, $18,000 on trade or whatever the number was. And because I was there, I started getting smart and being able to look at the other deal. And I got the largest commission check I had ever had at that point. Well, it's only a week into the biz, but $1,250 commission, because
nice.
The finance manager goes, no, 18,000 is what we sent the bank to pay off the car. That's not what we paid for that car. And that's when I was like, oh, wait, so what you show as the trade-off amount isn't always what you're actually paying? And they're like, no. So that's how I learned that. Now, Dan in the comments has a question. What qualifies as a major defect? Like on the CarMax auction page.
Excellent question, by
now,
the way, because that's something that I learned from Dan, the other Dan, the host Dan. So go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. So CarMax, like this Toyota RAV4, it says major engine defect.
Yeah.
Everything you'll see, there's no minor. You won't see one thing that's major transfer case defect, major transfer case, major transmission, major engine. There's no minor. You know why? Because CarMax is covering their ass. If there's anything even slightly, maybe a little bit wrong with the car, they'll just say major engine. So if there's anything wrong with the engine, you can't come back and say, well, there's something wrong here. So it could have a little tick. Yep. It could have some oil seepage. It could have, and Ray can attest to this as well, because he buys a lot of the cars that say that. And I know dealers, they ignore that. They're like, well, whatever, we'll fix whatever little thing it is. If it's knocking like, okay, that's a major engine defect.
And oftentimes an engine will knock like that just because it's low on oil. You might have an engine, a warning light illuminated. That's considered a major defect.
Yeah. So CarMax considers now regular auctions are different. A regular auction, typically they'll sell red light or green light, not like on Squid Game. Different, the red light, green light. If you haven't watched Squid Game, you understand what I'm talking about. But a red light car is as is. There's no arbitration. It is, you buy it, you own it, end of day. A green light car, you can have inspected after. You can do a post-sale inspection, and anything that you find that's wrong, you can then go into the arbitration process where you say, well, the transfer case is leaking a little bit. I'd like you to pay for that, or lower the price, or I'm going to walk away. And they can walk away at that point, or the seller can say, well, you know what, you bid way too much, so I'll go ahead and do that. And a lot of dealers, that get slimy, they cheat the system and they overbid for a car knowing there's problems with it. And then they negotiate and they end up getting a better price than they would have got on the block. They take all the other dealers out of the equation and they go into the arbitration and they work on it to try to make money that way.
Which is also done in the real estate industry. People will make a high offer contingent on inspection, and then they'll inspect it down quite a bit. Dan says needing crankcase bearings is a big difference than just a head gasket. You are absolutely right. But one of the reasons why they do this is because they cannot spend the time or money, and they don't have the resources to be able to properly diagnose what's wrong with the car. Because as you well know, Dan, you go halfway through figuring out what's wrong with the car and you're halfway through fixing it, because diagnosis is one of the biggest challenges for repairing a car. And we took a car recently to a shop that was experiencing an oil leak. They wanted $160 to diagnose the problem, which involved using some dye, using some this, using some that, pulling some hoses, checking some things. So, and most places, reputable shops will throw that money towards the repair anyway. But these places that are selling cars like this on a volume basis, they just don't have the time to determine what's wrong. And it could be as simple as transmission problem is that they go to put it into drive and they hear ka-thunk.
Yeah, it clicks in.
And that's a transmission problem. So they'll write down major transmission problem.
Yeah, as Dan says, what you were saying, once you start digging in, you find even more issues.
Yeah.
If you look hard enough, every car's got problems.
Yeah.
There's something you can fix. Now, the difference between CarMax and most other auctions is CarMax owns every car that they're selling. They're not a true dealer auction that is a consignment auction where if Ray's got some cars he wants to sell or I've got some cars I want to sell, we take them to the auction and they do an inspection on the car. If there's a leak, if you do a condition report, some people don't even bother. I always pay for a condition report. Most of the cars I sell at auction, we do the green light because we're like, you know what, we're going to get more money. And we know there's nothing wrong with the car. But CarMax owns the car. And as Ray says, they might have a 45-second drive, if that.
Yep.
You drive around the parking lot. He says, great place to dump off a car with a bad transmission and high gears. Yeah, if you don't have fourth or fifth gear, there's no way for them to find out.
And we should keep in mind here that as you all probably have experienced, someone in your family or maybe you yourself loves to tell the story about the car that had a such and such wrong with it. I drove it to the dealership and took it, and they took it in on trade, and I knew I was going to have to spend $1,500 to have the valves done and another $1,200 to have the such and such done, and they took it in and gave me $6,000 trade in on this car. Well, that's where they've got to protect themselves, because they know that certain cars are going to have certain things that are going to need to be repaired, and they may just not even worry about it. They may just turn it around and float it out to the dealer auction and put in there, major engine problems. So it doesn't always mean there's something wrong, but that's the whole point of buying anything, is to do the best that you can, do your diligence, because what you're doing when you're making a purchase for an automobile, a used automobile, is you're basically buying either ahead or behind of the true value index. So sometimes you'll buy ahead of the value index. You might get a $5,000 car for $3,500, but how long will that ahead position last? Maybe not very long. Maybe 6-8 months into the ownership, you'll have a $1,500 bill, and now you'll basically be at the even point of the value. With classic cars, if you spend $10,000 to buy a classic car that might only be worth $8,500, the way we refer to it in the vintage car world is you didn't pay too much, you just bought too early. Because a year later, the car you spent 10 grand to buy is now worth 10 grand. So if you're looking to really maximize the opportunity for purchase, just like with stocks or anything else that fluctuates in the marketplace, you can play that value game and try and target as best as possible to get the best price for the car at that right time. But most of the time, you're not going to be able to negotiate that unless you're really skilled. And look, both Dan and I are really skilled at buying and selling cars, but we've made mistakes too. We bought cars we thought were going to be worth more. We bought cars we thought, well, that can be easily fixed, or found out that something that's easy to fix is not easy to fix. And you end up just like you do with stock purchases. Some do very well, some don't do well at all.
Yeah. Now, Ray makes another good point, and these stories I love, is he's bought cars that are major this or that, and he's never found what they were talking about. Like, he took it out, drove fine. He bought one that was major engine because it didn't start. It needed gas. And he also had a BMW, and I remember this one.
Yes,
he bought a red BMW that it just needed a battery.
Yeah.
It was a non-runner.
Yeah. And keep in mind, these guys that are processing these cars, their job is to get it in and out. If the car's the car won't start. It's not that it's out of gas, it's that the car won't start.
Yep.
So off it goes, and they go work on the next thing because they got their boss yelling at them, come on, we got to move these things along. If that one doesn't start, let's go. And then you can buy that car. It's a no start car. It might be a $1,500, $2,000 car you're buying for $150.
Yeah. Well, none of them are 150 anymore, sadly. I used to, I actually bought cars and I still have this sheet. I was going to bring it in. I still have the sheet from the first CarMax auction in 2018 that I went to, and I bought a $25 run and drive car and a $50 run and drive car that when I was working for Copart that we sold there. Yeah. And now Copart and IA, Insurance Auto Auctions, they're two totally different types of auctions. That's where people go, an insurance company selling off a wrecked car, and they have different valuations too of when they determine when a car is salvaged. If your car is stolen or totaled, now, how are we going to determine when it's totally out? So these are, we left values and went into auction somehow, but that's not a problem. Dan in the comments also says, I heard an old saying, never buy a used car in the rain. No, it's always sell a car when it's raining.
Well, Dan's right. That is an adage. The other one that comes along is never buy a car at night, because it's hard to see the details of the surface. It's hard to see, what's going on with the condition of the paint. Rain will disguise a lot of body imperfections. You won't see little dings and dents. So that's a reason why. The other thing is that when it's raining outside, believe it or not, and psychologists have done a lot of studies on this, people tend to be more optimistic with their purchases. So if you go out to buy something in the rain, you really want it for some reason. Your mind is telling you this is a good thing, I'm going to get it, because we tend to be a little bit less excited, a little sad, a little depressed about the rain, especially after several days of rain. So we want to do something to reward ourselves. We're more likely to overspend in the rain.
The first day of rain, we're like, oh my God, it's finally raining.
Yeah.
And then by day 3, like, oh, enough with the rain
Enough
already.
of the rain already.
What I like to do, if possible, is I say, can I wash this? Can I take this for a nice wash? Because when you hand wash a car, you find everything wrong with it.
Yeah.
You find every little ding, every little scratch.
Yep.
And that's the only way. So maybe if you can't wash it, walk around it as if you're washing it. Like take that slow of like I'm sitting there with a sponge. I'm walking around the car, and you'll find dings and scratches and different things. Now Ray's giving another little tip that he probably shouldn't, but I'm going to say it anyway because he already posted it. If you're buying used cars with the CVT transmissions, the bands inside the transmissions cannot be obtained for the foreseeable future, making those throwaway cars. He found out the hard way on a 2015 Versa. Only paid $1,400, but when it heats up, the transmission dies. So send it to CarMax, drop it off the night before in the parking lot so it's cold upon inspection.
So
let a car get fully heated up before you do anything.
Yeah, and another thing to keep in mind, cars that have specialty features, things like navigation, and a lot of cars now have this as standard feature, but the more options and features on your car that are computer controlled, the older the car is with computerized features or digital electronics, the more expensive it's going to be when it goes out of warranty. Secondary warranties are great value opportunities for expensive luxury cars. If you purchase them as pre-owned vehicles, I recommend them highly, particularly for Mercedes, Porsche, Range Rovers, vehicles like that, where you're buying in the secondary market, and these vehicles have come off warranty because sometimes the $2,500 or $3,000 you'll pay for that secondary warranty will more than make up for its purchase price a year to 2 years into the ownership experience. And you'll be glad that you purchased that.
Yeah, but if they call you to sell you a warranty, do not buy those.
Yeah, don't
those
buy
are the typical scam ones. Those are fly by night. It's the same company. They keep showing up. They do tons of ads on TV. They hire B-list celebrities to do these ads, and then they don't cover anything.
They don't.
And they go, "We're just a marketing company. We were selling it for another company," they disappear and they come up under another name a year later.
The best place to buy a secondary warranty, believe it or not, is through your own automotive insurance company. They will make them available to you. And
Costco has a great plan too.
Costco has a fantastic one as well.
Yeah.
And very, very favorably priced. And when you read the amount of coverage you get on a Costco one, it's actually quite good, especially for an expensive vehicle. Because look, a motherboard on a Lexus is going to cost you a minimum $1,500 just for the board itself on a pre-owned Lexus. And by the time it's installed, it's going to get close to $3,000. So you want to make sure that if you're buying a pre-owned car, even if you got a smoking deal on it and you're ready to spend for some of that stuff, go ahead and get your secondary warranty. The other thing that is good to do if you buy a luxury vehicle in the secondary market is if you tell yourself you want to spend $25,000 and you buy one for $21,500, take the remaining $3,500, put it in the bank so that it's available to you to work on the car or service the car on a regular basis to help you maintain the vehicle so that you're able to support the value of it, because you were going to spend $25,000 anyway. You might as well, quote unquote, save the $3,500 and actually use it on the vehicle down the road.
Yeah. So and if they call you, just hang up. We have a warning. Your car is about to explode. You must buy this right away.
Yes.
Now, Adam says if you do wash the car, make sure you only wash it to the theme song from the end of our show.
Yes.
It's stuck in your head. So this isn't the end of the show, but just in case you missed the end of the show, this is that guy.
That guy. Do you see how hard he's focusing?
Look. He's like, oh yeah.
He's earning it.
Yeah. Wash this car.
And with that in mind, I think it's time
For old school.
Audio Jungle.
All right. Well, today we're going old school across the pond, as they say, and we're going over to England. And we're there in the 1950s.
I thought you were going to say Bremerton.
Bremerton. So we're England in the 1950s, where there was some pretty exciting things going on in the automotive industry, not the least of which was happening with a small company by the name of Austin Healey. And Austin Healey wanted to make a vehicle that was small enough to fit inside your bicycle shed, a vehicle that would be sporty, fun, easy to use, easy to work on yourself, and would be low cost. And so began 1958, which ran to 1971, believe it or not, the Austin Healey Bug-Eye Sprite. Referred to in England as the Frog Eye, and in America, the Bug-Eye. The Bug-Eye Sprite was a delightful little four-cylinder sports car with 48 horsepower, but being lightweight, very easy to use, quite nimble, and what would become known as the happy face car, the smiling Bug-Eye, the friendly Austin Healey. It was a car that both men and women enjoyed because it was just a charming little car. And for many people, the Bug-Eye not only became a fun sports car, it became the car that they referred to affectionately as their first car, the first car that they could purchase themselves. Used Bug-Eyes could be purchased for $300-400. The tires were cheap. The engine repairs were cheap. They were easy to work on yourself. Nothing broke down or wore out on a Bug-Eye Sprite. And it had minimal chrome. So if you were worried about things that were rusting or fading away, you simply took them off and got a new one and put it on the car. Interior was very Spartan. Vinyl for the seats, which was very durable. And of course, there was no top at all, which kept costs down on the car. But as you can imagine, the notion of driving in England, where it rained a lot of the time, became something of a problem. But for young people, because the interior was very durable and nothing was going to wear out too quickly, even in the rain, it was considered an all-weather car, a car that you could drive and have fun in sunshine or in rain. You could get them with, as this example shows, wire wheels or solid wheels. And again, very minimal chrome, no bumpers to speak of on some of the early versions, very basic engine to work on, easy to modify and improve if you wanted. Early versions came with minimal trim entirely on the interior. So a very, very Spartan car that was a lot of fun, easy to have fun with. And if you can find a photo of it, Dan, you'll see that there it is. There's the photo I was looking for. The entire hood lifted up. So you could get to anything under the hood. But more importantly, if you got a dent or a major front impact, you simply threw that hood away and went and found another $50 hood and replaced it. So they were very easy cars to work on, very easy cars to repair. And as a result today, because they made so many of them, they are relatively inexpensive to purchase today. A nicely restored one might set you back $15,000 to $20,000.
They're asking too much for this one.
I'm sorry?
They're asking way too much for this one.
What are they asking for this one?
$32,000.
That's quite a bit. So that car better be in very, very nice condition throughout. Top level cars can fetch close to $30,000, beautifully restored, fully restored ones. But again, you have to consider that if you were going to restore one yourself, it would take all of $30,000 to do it, because it does take quite a bit of money to restore one. I don't recommend restoring an Austin Healey because there are many available that are in great condition that you can get in and drive and enjoy. They are small cars. They are smaller than a Mazda Miata. They are smaller than a Mini Cooper. So you're going to be basically wearing it as a slipper, driving out in the elements. But two people in an Austin Healey with a little bit of weekend luggage, soft luggage in the trunk, off you go on a fantastic driving experience. You can put hundreds of miles on an Austin Healey without any trouble. A small toolkit in your trunk, some duct tape, a couple of looms of baling wire, and you basically can fix just about anything that could possibly go wrong with an Austin Healey.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
And the bug eye, I wonder why they call it that.
Because of the headlights.
I'm joking.
Oh, okay. But now that's
very obvious because they're like,
it's an interesting story too, because the original design for the bug eye, the headlights laid flat on the hood, and they had a little lever arm that you could push up, lock in place, and it would hold up in position, like the 928 Porsche that has the automatic lights that lay flat but then pop up, or the Lamborghini Miura, which also has that same feature. That particular design element, they found they didn't have the money in the budget to be able to spend for the hinge and the locking mechanism, so they just fixed them permanently in that upright position, which gave it that kind of look.
All righty. Now we have a very, very special car of the week.
All right.
Ray, I apologize. We have to skip Ray's car for this week. We'll show another one of his next week. But this one, Jake, I hope you're still watching. It's a very special Corvette we want to showcase as this week's car of the week. All right. So we have,
what do we got?
Hold on, let me bring it up. Where is it? Look at me. I'm Sandra D. Okay, here we go. This is our good friend Jake. He is selling his 2021 Chevy Corvette 2LT. It has 165 miles on it. This car is essentially brand new.
It's a brand new car.
But Jake is into racing cars, and he's got some Corvettes that he races and some classics. And there's a new one that he wants to get. So he's going to let this one go.
Wow.
He decided he needs the garage space and the money to buy this racing car, more of a classic Corvette to go with his other classic Corvette. So his loss is your gain.
This is a fabulous car. I've seen this car in person. It's basically a brand new car, and everything about this car is just gorgeous. The finish is spectacular. The interior is just off the charts. I will make one suggestion if you're listening, Jake. These photos are very nicely done, but they're a bit artful. And I think for this car, you can photograph it as it actually is. These look a little enhanced, and that's great. They're great photographs. The car looks beautiful, but I think people will want to see the actual tone on the car because it's in such immaculate condition. It's got 165 miles. So anybody who buys it has got to know that it's in perfect shape. And it is. And by the way, for anybody, we could do a whole show on this car. The 2021 Corvette is one of the most amazing automobiles. The technology in that car, it's a mid-engine car. It's absolutely gorgeous in every respect. The design is top shelf. The engineering is unprecedented. The amount of technology that you get for the money in that car it's jaw-dropping. It's every bit as good as any Ferrari that's out there for twice, maybe even three times the price. The performance is up there with pretty much any automobile performance vehicle out there, and the handling, and by the way, the comfort associated with the contemporary Corvette is really shocking. It's just, I'm continually impressed with these cars. The more I see them, the more I drive in them, the more I experience those cars. They really are absolutely off the charts.
Yeah, this black on black is gorgeous. It's got the Z51 performance package with the magnetic selective ride control. It's got the gorgeous wheels. I mean, this is just a gorgeous, gorgeous car. Still under factory warranty, obviously.
Yeah.
As you can see here, it's got 835 miles left on the 36,000 mile warranty.
And you can't get this car new anymore, I don't think. This is the next one is coming out. So
yeah, you can't go to a dealer and just buy a Corvette.
Right.
And you're going to have to wait quite a while.
I think it's 6 months. Or it might be as much as 6 months still to get one. And even then you can't get it. This one. You literally buy it on Thursday. You're driving it Friday.
Or you're driving it Thursday. If you go test drive it and you fill out the paperwork and you wire the money through
Yeah.
Tread, he is using Tread, which is where I work. So, obviously, oops, wrong way.
That's a really, really great car. And that's a
Yeah.
lot of car for the money, a lot of car for the money. If you're looking for a performance sports car, you cannot do any better than the mid-engine Corvette.
Yeah. So if you do want to check it out, go to tread.com and just search for Corvettes. And it can be shipped anywhere in the country. That's the best part. You
Yep.
pay for shipping, obviously, but you can buy in all 50 states. You can
Or-
finance on the website. You can get a warranty if you want to extend that warranty beyond.
Or you can buy it and drive it home. That's another thing that a lot of people enjoy doing is they buy a car in another state, they purchase it, and off they go. They drive it home and have a great time on their road trip.
Yes. Now, speaking of buying a car and driving it home, last week we went to that field in Paulsbo, to an undisclosed location, and looked at probably 60 cars. And there were a few that were, shall we say, junk, for lack of a better word.
There were quite a few that really they're just too far gone.
Yeah, they were just bad. Now, Raffi did share some pictures with me, which I'm going to pull a few up. Adam Jones says he might find 118,000 under his couch.
That is entirely possible. There's a friend of mine was collecting coins in a Sparklets water bottle, and it filled up, and he got another one, and I think close to 5 years later, he had 3, and he finally ended up dumping them out. And we should do a contest to see how much money he got out of 3 Sparklets water bottles. It was shocking.
Yeah, I mean, you never know. Now, if it's Bill Gates's couch,
yeah,
you just might find enough. Now, I've never used iCloud photos like this before, but these are the pictures you sent me.
There they go.
Now, this one's interesting because, again, some of it was very choppy last week. But this Buick right here was
that's
parked.
A Lincoln, that's a Lincoln Premier.
Oh, that's a Lincoln?
Yeah, the Buick is the other
Sorry,
one.
the Buick was the other one.
That's okay.
This car was parked in the garage many years ago, and the garage fell down around it.
Yes.
You can see the garage is still there.
Yeah, it's crazy. But there were some really interesting cars there. This is an interesting car. This is a car that would do very well if purchased, cleaned up, and restored, because these are desirable cars, but you're going to have to spend a lot of money on it.
Yeah.
Most of them were very rusty, not surprisingly, because they ended up outside.
Look at that BMW.
And this one, for all intents and purposes, this was a convertible, so there was some value in it, but you'd have to take this car completely apart and redo it and spend $20,000 to $25,000 on it to get a $20,000 to $25,000 car. This was a 4-door hardtop Chevy, a 57 Chevy.
Not the hardtop. Oh, this one's got the Post.
This is the Post. That's right. And this was basically the parts car to the hardtop. Thank you for correcting me, Dan.
I never get to correct you, so it was a pleasure.
Yeah, there's a I think a 50 or 51 Ford.
Look at the moss on top of that over there.
Yeah. And, many of these cars, the glass in some of these cars would be worth something. This is a 51 Ford Victoria. This is a very nice original car. It's going to need some work to put it all back together, but this one was indoors, so it had suffered only minimal. This is the Buick
that's
we're talking about. Really just too far gone. It's such a shame. It could be taken apart, fully restored, but you'd spend $20,000 alone on the chrome of that car. And you can buy a beautifully restored one for $45,000. So this one would take every bit of 40 to 45 to make halfway through the restoration.
Yeah, I would buy this car just for like hanging it on a wall.
Yeah,
putting it in an old Buick dealership or
sure,
as art. Now here's that 912 we talked a lot about.
This is a 914.
I mean 914. That's a 72. Yeah. That's where the two came. The 914.
Yeah. And Porsche did make a 912, but this 914 was a standard 4-cylinder car, and it was actually pretty solid. This is a car that if you were going to restore on your own, you could bring it home, clean the heck out of it, disassemble it, get after it, put your time and labor into it as a hobby car. This was an original Irish green factory car, which is a nice color for Porsche 914s. It did not have any body damage, so it wasn't hit, which is very important. The target top fits snugly, which is also an important thing. But again, you'd have to spend a lot of money on a car like this. Some motorcycles, and then there's a 69 Galaxy convertible, which Dan and I were looking at extensively.
It's still on the radar, if it's still there.
Yeah, it is still there.
I don't know. We'll find out. There's a house that fell on a witch.
And again, this was just a fascinating place to see and understand the history and the story of what went on there, the cars that were there. There were quite a few cars there, and they sold quite a few as well. I think they sold more than half of the cars. They had many indoors, including newer cars that just were there for minor problems. There's a 73 Beetle underneath the collapsed vintage building. Another angle on that. There you go.
There's the refrigerator, the 52 refrigerator that Raffi wanted.
The Crosley refrigerator. Yeah. And you know, we won't see this type of thing much longer, because that sort of neglect is it's unfortunate, but it's becoming less and less part of our American landscape, just simply because people don't buy cars for the sake of having them stacked up in their vintage or their farmland. So
now Jake does say, by the way, going back to his car, he would deliver enclosed in his enclosed trailer. He'll deliver it for a fee, especially to Kentucky. So he wants to deliver to the Corvette Museum. You can pick up your car there. Chris wants to know if somebody can give him a small loan of 118 grand. Janice wants to know if the Ranchero sold. I'm not sure. They're going to do a tool sale next Saturday, where all the tools are going to be, I guess maybe they pulled them all out of all the barns. They're going to have a big tool sale, getting rid of a lot of the tools that are there. And maybe we'll go back and just check to see if what cars are there. The 69 Galaxy needed a roof, which it has. They're in a box somewhere. It ran, he bought it. That's what brought me to that. Is the guy bought it in Spokane and drove it all the way back to Paulsbo and parked it 8 years ago. So it could run and drive great with some fresh fuel, and the tires were still full of air, and who knows. Adam has a very good point. It is sad to see all those cars in that shape.
Yes,
it looks like a car graveyard. It is sad. The intention was good, but the time just got away.
Yeah, and that's often what happens with multiple vehicles like that. You just can't keep track of them. I've had a wide range of cars in my collection over the years, and I find that more than 4 cars, it starts to catch up very, very quickly. And I've had many at one time, and what ends up happening is you end up neglecting them, especially if they're stored outdoors, because it's just too hard to keep track of them and keep up with them. Cars are expensive from a time perspective and from a dollar perspective as well. And the more you have of them, the more you have to commit to them. Otherwise, you end up with a lot of rusted cars outside.
Yeah. So if we bought anything, it would be one of the cars that was indoors. That's for sure. There was nothing outside that seemed worth it. There was a really nice 76 Pacer.
Oh, yeah.
That had good glass on the back. The windshield was broken. The driver's side or the passenger side door was down for who knows how long. So the interior, a lot of the cars had the passenger side door down, and I'm not sure the passenger side window down. Yeah. I'm not sure why. Well, we've gone way over our time, but
the window's down because that's the only way to steer when the car won't start.
Through the passenger side?
Oh, the passenger side?
Yeah, the passenger window was down.
Oh,
that's what didn't make sense.
Ah, okay, yeah.
No, you have a good point about the other way. All right, well, it's time for the annoying song. And then I'm going to go take a bunch of boxes to the Shred Fest that's happening today. If you have paper that needs to be shredded, they're doing it today, I think, as a fundraiser at Columbia Bank on Bainbridge Island. So if you're interested in shredding some paper, your taxes are all turned in and you're all done.
There you go.
I've got 3 boxes I found of stuff.
Good job.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's the show. We'll see you next week. We'll be live next week. The following week, Raffi's out of town, and I might go with the group down to the Pacific Raceways because Jake is having a race day for Jake's pickup. I'm not going to race or do anything, but I might go there as media
You could do a walk around and do a race day show.
Yeah. So maybe we'll get Raffi in remotely and we'll do a show that way.
There you go.
All right. Here's the annoying song. Talk to you next week.
See ya.
Bye.